Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is Max and Stacy Report with Stacy Herbert right here in El Salvador, land of the free, home of the Bitcoin. You know, a lot's going on all over the world, but right here in particular in El Salvador, and it's freaking people out. Stacy.
Right, Max. Well, El Salvador is home of the Great Rebrand, one of the greatest rebrands in history, I would posit, in fact. And we're going to look at why we're also here because of that rebrand that not only brought us here, but also that we're here to reframe the headlines that the mainstream corporate media always puts out. This is what you and I have been doing for over a decade, is reframing how they position, often to the benefit that they do. Their headlines are to the benefit of the elite of the world that have already run our global economy and monetary systems into the ground. We're here to reframe it and explain why you need things like Bitcoin. So the Great Rebrand, let's look at their headline about the story of El Salvador and Bitcoin policy here after about 9 months of a Bitcoin law. El Salvador's $425 million Bitcoin experiment isn't saving the country's finances. So they go in and they give a few numbers. The headline number is 425 million. The article mentions 374 million as an estimate that includes all the cost of Bitcoin so far, including the purchases for the Treasury, including the $170 million of airdrop, essentially, of Bitcoin of $30 that went to every citizen here, and including the cost of building the infrastructure. So they say it's 374 million, that this is the cost that they have endured, and that they now have a $50 million paper loss. So we're going to go into some of the details, which then the article itself, their own data, the financial data, shows that in fact, despite their headline, it is not a failure. It is actually a roaring success.
Right, the actual nuts and bolts of this story are talking about the incredible growth in El Salvador thanks to the adoption of Bitcoin made legal tender was at the very end of this piece. They couldn't ignore it. They couldn't pretend that it wasn't true, because numbers are numbers and you need to put them into a story that includes all the numbers. The headline is fallacious. The headline is false. It suggests that somehow things are not going well. But by the end of the article, they say, actually, this is a genius stroke by the president, Bukele, because the frickin' country's growing like a weed.
So one of the things that President Bukele says, and a lot of people actually think I said it because I say it so often, is that the place that El Salvador is going is to the place we want it to be. So we are building the future. The people of this nation, the people moving to this nation, we're building the future that we want to see. So here is their data that this article, the headline says it's a failure, right? This is towards the very end of a pretty long article on CNBC, which is a financial news network and online platform. They interview a guy from London. His name is Boaz Sobrado, and he's a fintech analyst. So this is what he says about this $50 million paper loss. El Salvador's big Bitcoin gamble may be struggling at the moment, but Sobrado tells CNBC that it has undoubtedly been a win in terms of attracting Bitcoin tourists. Quote, while they might be down in terms of unrealized losses in their Bitcoin investment, they are extremely up in terms of tourism. They have attracted a lot of people who are Bitcoin believers and a lot of capital from these people. And I think it is entirely possible that if you think of the unrealized losses as a marketing campaign, El Salvador has already achieved what it wanted to. Continued Sobrado, who also noted that countries like Costa Rica spend billions of dollars on marketing campaigns.
Right, exactly right. So this is a rebrand of a country.
For a mere, even if Bitcoin went to zero, they would still have achieved billions of dollars worth of an ad campaign, a marketing campaign for the country. Yet, as many have pointed out, because we highlighted this article, is that Costa Rica spent billions of fiat on their ad campaigns, their marketing campaigns, and have nothing but the marketing results from it. El Salvador has the marketing results amplified, magnified the $100 million, but they still have their Bitcoin.
Right. So if I recall, El Salvador is approximately $30 billion GDP, and
Costa Rica is about 60 billion, so equal population, actually about 5 million in Costa Rica, 6 million live here. This economy is 29 billion, Costa Rica is 61 billion, so twice the size of GDP in Costa Rica. So they have not had the problem of the gangs that were sent back from Los Angeles in 1994 and after that to El Salvador. They've had that problem that, you know. So when you think of the fact that CNBC here is pointing out that Costa Rica itself, which does not have that gang problem, which does not have a U.S. State Department warning against any travel to the country, they don't have that to overcome. Nevertheless, they are spending billions of dollars. El Salvador overcame all of that problem of the State Department warning, the gangs that were sent from Los Angeles. They had all of that, and yet despite that, they spent only $100 million and achieved a greater result.
Right, so Costa Rica, call it 60 billion, El Salvador 30 billion. I mean, is it unreasonable to think that El Salvador's GDP is going to catch up to Costa Rica in the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, it ought to be able to because they're equal sized population, similar, climate and geography. So I think it can. This is the greatest rebrand, as I said. I'm going to quote a tweet of myself.
Yes, quote your tweet. Quote yourself.
So I said this. I said, President Bukele performed the greatest rebrand in history. The people who even CNBC admits are now attracted to visit the country are the very people that I believe will turn El Salvador into the new Florence. As the florin attracted the best and brightest, so too Bitcoin plus Bukele. So, the florin was first minted in 1252. And it ran until 1533. What happened during that time? Well, the Renaissance, one of the greatest periods of Western history, happened in that period of time because of the florin. The florin was perfect, the perfect measurement. Everybody in the world trusted this florin coin, a gold coin, right? Now, gold was around, everybody had their own gold coin, but people, in North Africa, Asia, wherever the merchants were trading with, trusted that they didn't need to measure it, they didn't need to test it, they knew it was real and they knew it was to be trusted. So those merchants who showed up with the florin got more trade caused greater wealth caused more investment into Florence, which drew in more artists, the Da Vinci's, the Michelangelos, the Raphaels came, the architects, the discoverers, the mathematicians. All of those people were drawn to Florence because first came the perfect money. Now, we have the same thing here. At that time, by the way, all of Europe was in the Dark Ages and, the plague and bubonic plague and mass death. So it wasn't like an attractive, fun place to be, but it turned into one after the florin.
Right, so El Salvador has the potential to similarly attract the best and the brightest with perfect money, with Bitcoin. It's already happening. So the tourists come. This leads to, in the tourism sector anyway, you've got an increase in hotels, which increases the workers, which increases the income, which increases GDP, which increases the adoption of Bitcoin, which increases tourism, which increases the hotels. So you got this virtuous cycle building up, just like in Florence. It's all around Bitcoin. You've got the President Bukele, which is like the Medici of Central America. These other countries in Central America are looking at El Salvador and they're saying, how do we get in on some of this action? And it really has become the land of the free. People who are tired of the oppression that's happening in some of these other fiat-based economies. And fiat money is oppression. Fiat money is slavery. Fiat money is kind of the end of humanity as we know it, whereas Bitcoin is a continuation.
I would say that continuing with my theme of what the florin did for Florence and what Bitcoin will do to El Salvador is that fiat is like the Dark Ages, and we are emerging from those Dark Ages, and the center of the new Renaissance, Renaissance 2.0, is here in El Salvador. George Bodine, who is a guy who's an artist, and I often tease him on Twitter because he was afraid to come here. He's an artist, but he's planning on coming here now. the reason why I tease him is because he was like an Air Force fighter pilot and then like a cop. So I'm saying like, dude, I'm here. Like this place is amazing and it's wonderful. It is safe and it's fun. And this is where Renaissance 2.0 is happening. He responded to my tweet and he said, I love this reference to the florin. Amazing how little people understand the power of a simple coin and its relationship to trade, power, and entrepreneurship. The Medicis certainly did, says, he signs off George the artist. So that's what I posit as well, is that 500 years from now, just as we know Medici, yes, we know he was wealthy, yes, he was a banker, but why we know him? Because there were other wealthy bankers at the time. You don't know any of the other wealthy bankers right now that existed in the Italian states at that time. You know Medici. Why do you know Medici? You know Medici because of the Renaissance, because of the greatness, because of the best and brightest that were drawn to his city. That's why you know him. That's why we still speak of Medici, and in 500 years, we'll still speak of Bukele as what he had done to this economy and this Renaissance 2.0 that will happen here in El Salvador, in Central America, and then the rest of Latin America.
Right, so this financial headline, which talks about all the sunk costs and the waste of money, is completely wrong. I mean, they're missing the point. They don't understand that this is an investment that will ultimately rise, as of course Bitcoin is programmed to increase purchasing power against fiat money, mathematically guaranteed to do so. Meanwhile, you've got all this boom times in terms of people coming here and participating in a brand new emerging force of excitement, and they've got so many natural resources and energy, it's quite something.
And I also want to point out that, of course, Medici, he wasn't flipping art. Like, he didn't invest in Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci or Botticelli or, order David to be, a sculpture to be put into the center of Florence because he was hoping to flip it to somebody. That was the marketing cost of Florence and his understanding of legacy and the future. Like, you and I will be remembered for our artwork here on the set, the turgos, the national bird of El Salvador, right here in our set.
There's a controversy whether those are turgos or are they parrots.
Uh-oh.
The people here seem to believe that they are parrots, and we were sold turgos, the national bird. And we, of course, paid a little extra because, hey, this is the national bird. But I think we got sold parrots. So now we've got parrots, and but they're still cute. And I believe they have parrots in this country too, unless there are no parrots in El Salvador, in which case it makes no sense. We have parrots on the set for no reason. But hopefully there are parrots here, and next time maybe some turgos, which they're blue and orange.
Toragos. See,
Toragos.
yes, that's true. So again, the final thing about this, the headline, the deceptive headline, is that if you hadn't read past the headline, and I have to say Max actually had read the headline the day before I did, and you didn't get past there.
No, I never read past that.
You said, did you see that horrible headline in CNBC? So I actually decided to actually read it. And I did almost stop reading, like after a few minutes. It took a few minutes of reading to get to the point where they're actually like, you could argue, the article points out, the one that is slamming them, you could point out that this has achieved amazing things. Like, that's what I'm saying is like, bringing the best and brightest here is what will transform this economy.
No, I didn't read it, and I, in fact, was tweeting all about it and getting nasty. And had I not made so many spelling errors in my tweet, I would have posted that tweet.
But what I was saying was that what I argue is that bringing the best and brightest here will transform over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 100 years, just like the Renaissance, just as the previous 40 years in El Salvador, what we saw in El Salvador under the fiat dark ages, what we saw here was the exodus, the flight from El Salvador out. And that's why you had a bad economy. That's why you had a bad political system. That's why there was a spiral down, because the more people left, the less economy there was.
Yeah.
So the more people return, the more not only the diaspora return, but people like us, people like other Bitcoiners we know, other industries that will be attracted here.
The boomerang Salvadorans coming back. They should have a state bird with a boomerang. That should be the state bird with a boomerang. That's why I'm making that recommendation. Well, okay, I think we sorted it. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to Max and Stacy Report. I'm Max Keiser. Last week, I had the great opportunity to speak with Nik Bhatia. He is the author of Layered Money, soon to be in Spanish. He'll be here in El Salvador soon to talk about it. Now, we sat down to chew through the numbers, stocks, bonds, interest rates, Forex markets. Where are we going with all this? Is there a specific number that maybe can guide us through all of this?
Well, right now, the most important number to look at is the difference between the long-term yields and the short-term yields in the US Treasury yield curve. Right now, the difference is basically zero, indicating that we are on the precipice of an economic contraction or a recession of some sort. Now, the technical recession could be already underway, given that we had negative Q1 GDP growth and Q2 GDP growth tracking close to zero, but it could also be a year away, and that would be historically in line with prior yield curve inversions that usually precede a recession by 1 to 2 years.
So the cost of borrowing money for 1 year and the cost of borrowing money for 30 years is the same.
Well, it's not particularly because of the difference in borrowing costs, but it's more an indicator of expectations. So we expect the Fed to be tightening policy. That's why the 2-year yield is above 3%. We expect the Fed to try to slow down growth and inflation with higher rates. But at the same time, the expectation for growth over a 10-year time horizon is not that high. So it's also 3%. And that difference in expectations is an indicator that we're at the end of an economic cycle.
On February 26, 2022, the U.S. seized $630 billion of reserves held by Russia. Was a monetary Rubicon crossed? What are the range of possible consequences we might see in the short, medium, and long term?
Yeah, what happened with Russia is definitely a good long-term indicator that countries are going to want to diversify their reserves away from treasuries, at least at the margin, due to geopolitical risk. With that being said, I don't think it's that big of a deal on the short run. We now have a very us versus them monetary system in which there are allies of the US that hold treasuries without any fear of asset seizure. And then you have countries outside of that sphere like Russia and China that really are trying to go away from treasuries. We've seen China's treasury stock decline steadily over the last several years, and Russia actually sold all of their treasury holdings a couple years ago, despite them still having some Federal Reserve, some balances at the Federal Reserve.
Right. Well, let's talk about another currency, the yen. All this globalized forex trading, sometimes the yen gets overlooked. It is a major funding currency in that it's been used by speculators to borrow and then invest in higher yielding currencies around the world, the so-called carry trade. It's sold off hard in the past few weeks. Yield curve control seems to be faltering. What next? And does any of this matter for the Fed's plans to perhaps do the same?
So I don't think it matters so much for what the Fed is going to do. Japan is in a unique situation in which it is a highly indebted country with rates that have been held by the central bank at zero for decades. Now, we know that the Fed has attempted to manipulate rates through a lot of quantitative easing, but look at the Fed right now. They're raising rates and they've stopped purchasing US Treasuries and they're actually letting the Treasuries mature. So at least the Fed is trying to go for periods without manipulating the Treasury market and the currency, or trying to step away from that manipulation. Where in Japan, they've really been locked into this. And now it's blowing up via two mechanisms: the Japanese bond market, the government bond market, and the currency market as well. So we will see Japan have an adjustment, whether it's both rates and currency or just currency, and they end up bringing rates back down with even more QE and more yield curve control. But eventually we'll see the market make an adjustment, and it could be with a yen dramatically weaker than it is today, and that it then dramatically weaker than the move that we've already seen so far in 2022.
Well, let's move away from currency chaos to a country that seems to know what they're doing over here in Salvador. The president only a year ago announced that Bitcoin would be made legal tender. Now, Nik, explain why Bitcoin was the right decision and what makes Bitcoin layer one money.
Bitcoin was a good decision for El Salvador to implement as a parallel currency because it gives people the freedom to escape the dollar denomination and the dollar system as accounting denomination. I think that's an empowering tool, and giving people the choice is an empowering move. And so I look for other countries to do this, to not necessarily adopt Bitcoin as the only legal tender, but adopt it and legalize its use without an undue tax burden, so that people can operate their own personal balance sheet in a currency that's not necessarily tied to their own country or to the United States or to the Federal Reserve Bank. And so I'm excited to see more countries start to make this decision. It really comes down to removing the undue tax burden on Bitcoin denominated transactions and investment activity. Once you do that, you let people choose and swap between currencies without having to make a tax decision each time they do that. So I look for that to continue, and I hope to see an increase in El Salvador GDP and business interest coming into the country off of the back of these decisions.
Right. Now, what I'm hearing from you when you're talking about this is Cynthia Lummis, senator from Wyoming, has got a bill in Washington she's trying to get passed. They're figuring out at what threshold would constitute a taxable event. Is it $600, for example? And this is the kind of fine-tuning that's going on. But in your mind, as I understand it, you're just saying, look, just treat Bitcoin as money, and you don't need to waste a lot of time with all this other bureaucracy that accompanies it. That's a big waste of time.
That would be the best way to do it. Now, we in the United States are unlikely to go directly to that. So that's why the effort from pro-Bitcoin government officials is at least getting to that $600 to $800 level where we can remove the tax burden. But that leaves capital gains tax and other taxes active in the United States. I think that's probably a long or a tall mountain to climb, and one step at a time is how I think we'll see that go in the United States.
Right, so getting back to El Salvador, where the president has made Bitcoin legal tender, you do have a tremendous knock-on effect. You've got tourist dollars pouring in and to the tune of hundreds of millions. Investment, forward investment into the country, inward investment is being calculated in the billions. When you add it all together, the question is, how do you see it going forward in the short, medium, and long term?
Well, I'm optimistic. I think that the early GDP and tourism numbers are a positive sign. And we have to look at that and look especially that the growth is outsized relative to other players in the region or other countries in the region. So I'm very optimistic. I want to see it continue. I think 12 months doesn't give us enough data to really reach too many conclusions, but I think the optimism and the early data is there, and we'll look for that to continue.
Well, recently the president hosted 44 central bankers. They came here to El Salvador as part of a regularly scheduled program, but they got into Bitcoin quite extensively. They've got their wallets, they're trading Bitcoin. They've now gone back to their respective countries and they're orange pilling the world. And it's mostly the global south, Nik. So is this a trend to look forward to, that it's going to be the global south to lead the way in this hyper Bitcoinized world we're going to see in the next few years? What are your thoughts on that?
There is no reason for a non-US country, for example, these Latin American, Central American nations, there's no reason for them to shy away from embracing Bitcoin as a parallel currency. This doesn't force the hand of anybody in the nation to do anything. What it does is attracts business and attracts people that are interested in low tax environments, in innovation forward environments. There's no reason for these countries to not embrace Bitcoin, at least as a parallel currency, as a potential marketplace for people to come that are looking to build Bitcoin businesses. They know that they can trust this and that jurisdiction to find a home. I really think that it's a trend that I'm surprised we haven't seen one or two more nations follow suit, but we know that the president of El Salvador is a little bit of a maverick here and going first. And I really do anticipate that his example will be followed by other nations, especially as they realize that it works, right? So they're also waiting to see maybe 2 years of economic growth post Bitcoin decision to see empirically, this is something that can work. We want to roll it out for our people. And here are the things that we've learned from the successes and mistakes that have happened in El Salvador.
Right, Nik, so your book, Layered Money, and it's a great title, it's a great book. It looks at the global financial world and like a layer cake. You've got different layers and they're all operating simultaneously of finance, and at the bottom or base layer is tier one money. And this is basically and traditionally been gold, and sometimes it's the US Treasuries. Now we've got Bitcoin. But the question is, with this crash, with the volatility, is it still, Nik, tier one money?
Yes. So the dollar and Bitcoin are actually different things that we're comparing, because the dollar is this it's this denomination that doesn't really have any form anymore, because it's issued by so many different counterparties all over the world with varying risk, some risk being outsized and requiring bailouts over multi-decade time horizons, whereas the US Treasury security is an asset that is used as layered one money. Previously, we've had gold and promises to pay gold. That's what makes gold layer one money. Bitcoin has already followed this example of gold, wherein we have Bitcoin, a commodity, and we have exchanges that are issuing deposits, promising to pay Bitcoin, and these businesses are flourishing around the world, proving that Bitcoin is a first layer of money and can be the collateral that second layer money or counterparty money is issued using Bitcoin as the base. So is the dollar heading out? I don't really think so. The dollar is going anywhere as a denomination. But what we see with Bitcoin is that we have a new choice. And we see that at the margin, money will flow out of dollar denominated assets toward Bitcoin for the reasons that Bitcoin is attracted to them. So one of them can be avoiding the risk of asset seizure by the Federal Reserve. One can be avoiding geopolitical risk. Another can be avoiding long-term inflation relative to real assets. And the list goes down. So with Bitcoin, we do have a commodity money that doesn't have a counterparty. This makes it uniquely positioned to be a base layer money or a layer one money that we can use to build a financial system. Now, on the internet, natively, we see that already starting to happen. At the nation state level, we're in very, very early stages, barely begun, basically, with El Salvador making the first move last year. So, and that is going to be a long track. The dollar's not going anywhere, guys. We're going to see decades of this rise of Bitcoin and erosion of the dollar, transformation of the monetary system into more of a fragmented world, with Bitcoin, taking more and more of a role going forward, but it's going to take a long time.
All right, well, that's going to do it. Nik Bhatia, thanks for being on Max and Stacy Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Max and Stacy Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Until next time, bye, y'all.